In this video, we are going to write a class that moves the payroll data underscore data.csv file into a database. So right now the situation kind of looks like this. The payroll data is just in a comma separated value file like this. All right. And we want to split it out. We've worked with this data set in a previous video. There we were just using character streams to process the data and read and write from files. So now what we're going to do is just write a program to convert this over to a database file. So I have already gone ahead and done the part that we talked about in the last video. This just uses a file reader wrapped in a buffered reader to read the file line by line. And then I use the split method in the string class to split across the commas into an array of strings and convert the hours worked and the hourly rate to numeric columns. I convert those into numeric types in Java, int and double. Okay, and here I'm just printing this out. Just so you can see that it's working, it's reading the data file. All right, so it reads those 1,000 records and prints them out. Okay. All right, so now what we need to do is to go to work on writing to a database. So what we need to do is to start with a connection object, right? So create the connection, and I'm just going to call mine connection, and that is in a class called driver manager dot get connection. And I need to tell it what file as a string, and remember the syntax for that, like in the previous example, is JDBC : SQLite : and then the name of the file, so payroll db.db. Okay. When I go to compile that, I'll get some errors because I need to add in the imports. First off, for import java.sql.connection, and then also for driver manager as well. So import all right, so that should go. Except, yeah. So we have a checked exception, right? This method get connection, and that is a SQL exception, so we need to add a catch block down here. And just for the purpose of keeping things as simple as possible, we won't really, in this first, this is one of the first few examples, we will just not do much in the catch block here. All right, and let's see, that's probably, yeah, we're going to have to import SQL exception as well. Okay, so we are good there. It's opening up a connection, right, to a file. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is to create a statement object, all right? And that statement object is what we're going to use to issue the SQL commands to the connection. So that would be a statement object. I'm just going to call it statement, and connection, that's the connection that we established up here, and then it's create statement like so. All right, and we'll use that statement object to issue the commands that we need to do, and we'll have to add the import there. I think that's it on the imports. Of course, you could just do import java.sql.asterisk, right, and not have to do these separately. But just the first few times, I like to show exactly the classes that we need to import. So that should do it. Okay. All right. So looks good. There is, let's see, a couple of other things that we'll need to do. One is to set the query timeout to 30. And that, if you look at the author of this SQLite JDBC, he has that in his example. So that's what I'm going to do on this one. All right, and then let's see. So the other thing that we're going to do is to call this command execute update this method, and we are going to issue the command drop table if exists. And so I think I'm just going to name my table payroll. All right, and remember that will delete the payroll table if it's there. At the beginning, right, we're probably going to be making errors and things like that. And if you don't have that, then if the payroll, we're going to create the payroll table each time. Just start with a fresh new one each time while we're testing this out. And if you already have an existing payroll table in there, if you try to create it, which is what we're going to do in the next line, then it will throw an exception, and we'll get this message down here. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there, and then the next thing is I am going to create the table. So I'm going to create table payroll. Okay, and so now when I am creating this table, I need to know the fields that are in there and the type. So if we look at the payroll data file, here are the ID numbers. The ID numbers contain these hyphens in there, so we'll just treat them as strings for now, so we don't have to worry about it too much. So I'm going to call that field ID, and I'm going to put text for the data type for that. Remember, that is these data types that we're talking about here are not Java data types, but actually they are data types within SQLite. So if you have some question, about what the data type is, you can just look in at the data types for SQLite. All right, and then after that is the first name, I believe. Yep, first name, last name, right? So I'm going to call the first name field first name, and its type is text, and then last name, and then text. And I will need to continue this as a string here. And let's see what comes next. Email, I think. Yeah, email and title. So I'm going to call the email field email. It's text. I'm going to call the title field title, and it is also text. All right, and then next up is the hours worked. And that's an integer. And remember, in SQLite, it's integer, not int. And then finally, the hourly rate. And for that one, it's a decimal number, right? So I'm just going to say numeric. All right, so now when we run this, right, we should get a table it will create this payroll file, our payroll.db over here, and then it should create the table in there. Okay, I got incomplete input on there. Let's see, yeah, I forgot to close this parenthesis off right here. So let's try that. Okay, that looks good. And now you can see we have the payroll database file here. I can open it up and just take a look at it. And you can see there's my table, right, with payroll. If I expand it, then I should be able to see the fields, right? ID, first name, last name, email, title, hours worked, hourly rates, and then there are corresponding data types here. Okay. If I go to browse data though, right, there's no data in that table. I haven't put anything in there yet. Okay. All right, so I am going to close this out. Okay, next up, let's see, is, so that's looking good there. And so we're going to continue, right? We're going to read a line out of the data file. We're going to split it. Okay, and do all this. So down here, really, we don't want to print it out. I'm just going to leave that in there. For the time being, in case something goes wrong, then we'll be able to tell maybe what happens there. So, but really what I want to do is add the line to add that data to the database itself. So I'm going to do that again with another SQL command. So statement.execute update, and then create, not create table payroll, but insert into payroll values, and then here I will need to put the values that I have split out here. So this will be very similar to what I've got up here when I'm printing this out. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and expand that out a little bit. So I am also going to do string.format here, and then insert into payroll values. And then here I'll start stacking the values in there. So when I insert strings into there in the SQL command, they have to be surrounded by single quotes. So I'm going to put single quote %s, and then a comma, and then the line's already getting long, so I'm going to go down here. All right, and then pretty much for the rest of this, right, I would do this almost exactly like this. So I'm just going to copy this out and then alter it like the way it needs to be altered there. All right, so again, around these %s's, I am going to have single quotes, right, because that's part of the syntax for the SQL command that we want to execute. For the %d, since it's an int, right, that goes right here, and a double, those do not need to be surrounded by single quotes in the SQL syntax. All right, I'm going to get rid of this %n. I don't really need that. I just need to close these parentheses right here. Okay. And then the stuff that I want to stick in here is the same as when I was printing it out, right? So the first %s is for the ID number. Then for the first name, then the last name, then the email, then the title, then the hours worked, and then the hourly rate. Okay. So that is the SQL command to insert rows into that particular table, payroll. All right, let's give it a shot and see what happens. All right, everything seems to be going pretty good. And so you can see I get this error right here, SQL error or missing database near Mannion. Okay. And just looking at the name right here, the person's name is Ola O'Manion. And that caused an error, right? It caused this to quit adding data in there. And the issue here is that I have a single quote right here. So this single quote is going to be a problem because of the fact that the SQLite SQL uses single quotes like this to surround strings. Okay, and so if one of those appears in your string, then that's going to cause an error when I'm doing this. So what we have to do on this, right, is the way that you would do that in the SQLite language. If you want a single quote within a string, you have to put double single quotes, okay, in a row. So what we're going to have to do is over here in parts 1, which was the first name and the last name, we are going to insert double quotes in there. So what we're going to do is replace a single quote with a double quote, double single quotes, sorry, like so. All right, and so everywhere in parts 1, which is the first name, wherever there is a single quote, the single quote is going to be replaced by double single quotes, and then that will fix that issue. We need to do it with the last name as well. Okay, so that should fix the issue with Ola O'Manion or anybody else who has a single quote in their first or last name. Right? We shouldn't be in here. It shouldn't be in the email either, right? I guess it could possibly be in the title, maybe, but it's more likely to be here in one of these two. All right, so let's compile that and just make sure that it runs all the way through. And it would have been better probably if we uncomment out that system.out println on line 30, because that's what's taken a long time. All right, well that's running then. Okay, there we go. Open up. So you can see that fixed the issue. Let's take a look at our data file now, our database now. And so if we go to open database, oops, there we go. Open database, and go to payroll. All right, so there is, actually that's the wrong one. That is a different version. using was in demo. All right, so there we go. And now when we go to browse the data, we can see all of our data is in there now. Okay, and it doesn't really take as long. If I comment this out, you'll see, and we don't really need to be printing out the data either. We're just doing that for testing purposes. We should see that it goes a lot faster with when that's commented out, but maybe not. I don't know. It's kind of taking a while. All right, so that is about it on this video. Next up, right, in the next video, we are going to now that we've got our data into the database, right, then we are going to look at how do we get data out of the database. We're going to do that with a query, a SQL query, and these statements that we've been running are data manipulation language. They create table and insert, so you're changing and manipulating the data. So in the next video, we'll talk about writing queries to get data out of the database. All right, and maybe it was wrong. It does take a little bit to put these 1,000 lines in there. Okay, there it is. All right, so that's it for this one.